At an office lunch overseas, someone smiled and said, "You're Korean? I love K-pop." I smiled back. I reached for the kind of answer the moment could hold. Something light, something easy. But there was another answer underneath it, too large for the table and too tangled with the industry, the label, and the parts of Korean culture that rarely make it onto the stage. When people tell me they love K-pop or K-drama or Korean food, part of me feels glad. It means something from Korea has reached them warmly. A song, a drama, a dish. Sometimes that is the first door into a culture. But while they are talking about artists they follow, dramas they remember, or songs that made them happy, my mind often goes somewhere else. Behind the stage, behind the label, behind the neat little word K. I think about the business, the formula, the training system, the way a culture can become easier to sell than to understand. I can only speak from my own life, not for every Korean person. But for me, the strange feeling begins here. I am glad Korean culture is loved. What worries me is how often we turn that love into a formula and then start making culture to fit the formula. The question sounds simple. Which group do you like? Is that idol really famous in Korea? Have you watched this drama? Can you teach me how to make kimchi? I know the polite version of the answer. Yes, they are popular. I have heard that song. That drama was everywhere. Kimchi is delicious, but hard to make. Those answers are not false. They just leave out almost everything I am actually thinking. Because when someone says they love K-pop, they are usually talking about artists, idol groups, performances, choreography, music videos, fandoms. They are talking about something that gave them joy. But when I hear K-pop, I also hear the industry around it. Young trainees entering companies before they know who they are. Years of singing, dancing, language lessons, image training. Groups assembled carefully, concepts chosen early, voices and bodies shaped to fit a track. New groups appearing quickly, then disappearing quietly. Only a few becoming famous enough to be remembered. Of course, this is not the whole story. There are talented artists inside that system, songs with real craft, performers with terrifying discipline. But that is exactly why I cannot answer casually. The person across the table is talking about something they love, and I am thinking about the machine that learned how to make love repeatable.
The same thing happens with kimchi. Someone asks, "Can you teach me how to make it?" I understand the question. It sounds friendly. But in my memory, kimchi is not a small recipe. Kimchi is winter. It is my mother preparing for something larger than dinner. Cabbages stacked in the kitchen or on the balcony waiting for salt. Radish, garlic, ginger, green onion, red pepper powder, fish sauce or salted seafood chosen carefully because one wrong smell changes everything. Large bowls, plastic gloves, tired wrists, a house that smells different for days. And once the kimchi is made, it is still not finished. Fresh kimchi has one taste, ripe kimchi has another. Older kimchi becomes stew, fried rice, pancakes. Sourness becomes useful. Time becomes flavor. So when someone asks me about kimchi across a clean lunch table, I do not feel bothered by the question. I just do not know how to make my answer small enough. Because what they are asking about is food. But what I remember is weather, labor, family, fermentation, and a woman's body doing work no one called culture while she was doing it. That is what happens to many things under the K label. They become easier to name and harder to carry whole. Before the word K-pop became so large, Korean popular music was not one thing to me. There were older Korean pop songs from the 80s and 90s, ballads, folk-influenced songs, rock bands, dance music, singer-songwriters, smaller labels, smaller rooms. Some were huge in Korea, some stayed beloved for decades. They still appear in taxis, radio programs, television contests, weddings, bars, and someone's playlist from 20 years ago. They did not all travel outside Korea. They were not all designed to, but they stayed. I think about the ballads especially, not because they were purer, not because the past was better, but because they carried a kind of Korean emotion I still recognize. Serious, sentimental, restrained, and excessive at the same time. A singer could stand still and make one line feel like a confession. A melody could rise slowly, as if emotion needed permission before becoming visible. Under the love, separation, waiting, regret, there was something else, a country moving quickly, people trying to feel modern, old restraint sitting inside new confidence. I listened to those songs alone, on buses, walking home, lying in my room with one earphone half broken, from cassette tapes to CDs, from CDs to MP3 files with broken letters in the title. They were not trying to introduce Korea to the world. They were made for people already inside the feeling. Not everything meaningful becomes global. Not everything that lasts becomes a brand.
I understand why the letter K works. It is short, it travels well, it helps people find things. K-pop, K-drama, K-food, K-beauty, K-tourism. A label can be useful, but sometimes the K label feels less like confidence and more like a shortcut. A good film does not become deeper because it is called K-film. A good song does not become more Korean because it is called K-pop. If something has its own craft, history, and quality, maybe it can stand by its own name, a director's name, a musician's name, a region, a technique, a recipe, a memory. Instead, I often see the same front shelf being arranged again. Red food, clear skin, soft romance, youthful faces, palace roofs, neon streets, traditional patterns used like texture. And I see it in television too. I remember watching Korean variety shows where celebrities went abroad to introduce Korean culture. They opened temporary restaurants in foreign cities. They carried Korean museum goods to a street stall in Europe. They hosted foreign guests in Korea, cooked for them, watched their faces closely, and waited for the familiar moment. The smile, the surprise, the compliment. This is delicious. This is beautiful. Korea is amazing. I understand why those shows are comforting. They make culture feel warm and simple. They turn distance into a table. But while watching them, I sometimes felt embarrassed in a way I could not easily explain, because the exchange often felt too one-directional. We arrived with our food, our objects, our pride, our small mission to introduce ourselves, but I kept wondering whether we had really learned how to meet the other culture in return. What language does this moment need? What context is missing?
Are we sharing or waiting to be admired? Sharing culture is not only bringing our things to another table, it is also learning how that table listens. And once we learn what gets rewarded, we begin to make more of the same. Food becomes a challenge, skin becomes proof, tradition becomes decoration, sadness becomes aesthetic, a country becomes a mood board.
This is where my discomfort turns inward, toward the way we choose to send our culture out, toward how quickly we notice what sells, then begin to build around it. I do not want Korean culture to be treated only as a business opportunity. Of course, culture has always lived near money. Songs need stages, films need crews, food needs kitchens that can stay open. But survival is different from shaping everything around what can be sold fastest. And pride is different from putting a K label on anything that might attract attention. There are things in Korea that deserve more care, not because they are old or traditional, but because they hold memory. Old songs that do not fit an algorithm, indie musicians who may never become global idols but still make something precise, crafts that require hands, time, repetition, regional food that does not look dramatic on camera, ways of speaking that carry class, age, region, intimacy, family rituals we repeat without fully understanding, histories we memorized for exams but did not really inherit. Intangible things, too, noticing silence, offering food, avoiding direct refusal, laughing when something hurts. Not all of these things are beautiful. Some are uncomfortable, some are heavy, some are not easy to explain. And if we want to share them, we also have to learn how to meet people where they are. Not only what we want to show, but what they are able to hear. If we are the ones carrying this culture, then maybe our work is not only to make it popular. Our work is to understand it well enough not to flatten it, and to share it carefully enough that it does not become only a performance of being admired.
Maybe that is why I pause when someone says, "I love K-pop," because one part of me feels glad. Something from Korea has reached them warmly, but another part grows quiet, because behind that small letter, I hear more than music. I hear companies, training rooms, contracts, concepts, global strategy, beauty standards, tired bodies, and a market asking what can be repeated. And behind that, there is another Korea, older songs, smaller labels, family kitchens, local words, worn objects, rituals no one has branded yet, ordinary people who do not look like anyone's fantasy. I do not want to say one Korea is real and the other is fake. That would be too simple. K-culture is real, the success is real, the talent is real, the affection from outside Korea is real. But so are selection, packaging, and the things left behind. So maybe the question is not whether K-culture is good or bad. Maybe the question is whether we can welcome attention without becoming too faithful to it. Whether we can send things out into the world without losing the slower things at home. When I think back to that lunch table, I remember the smile first. Someone was trying to meet me through something they loved.
I do not want to close that door, but I also remember the sentence I did not say. You love the stage, I understand, but I am thinking about the room behind it. And maybe I wanted to say the same thing to Korea. People are looking at us now. So what will we show them? Only the version that is easiest to love? Only the version that performs well? Only the version that can be repeated, labeled, exported, and sold? Maybe sharing culture is not only opening a door. Maybe it is also learning how to sit at the table without placing everything we love in the center first. K-culture can be a beautiful door, but a door is not the whole house. And if we keep polishing only the entrance, we may forget what was stored in the rooms behind it, the songs that do not travel easily, the foods that take winter to understand, the crafts that need hands more than slogans, the histories that still embarrass us, the memories that cannot become a brand. Maybe that is where I still want to stand, somewhere behind the K label, listening for what the label cannot carry. And the question that stays with me is this: when a culture becomes very good at being loved from a distance, what does it begin to lose up close?